We'll be making this today. It is delicious. This has been baking for about 4.5 hours. Today I'm going to be making baked beans. Baked beans are a dish with a lot of history in the United States. In fact, let's go back a little bit. The original use of this bean was not from colonists that settled in the North America. The original use of this bean was Native Americans who used it, and they sweetened it with maple. Plain and simple. The Plymouth colonists learned about this recipe. They then took it and made it theirs and kind of adapted it, of course. And then over history, there were changes in this recipe. Changes such as, and some of it affected by England. A good example. You know, a lot of this baked beans recipes have molasses in it. Molasses was introduced because England taxed the sugar heavily. And so the colonists, wanting to rebel, said, okay, nuts to you, we'll use molasses. And they did. Then later on, mustard was introduced, as well as salt pork, as well as many other things over time. I've even seen recipes that had like Worcestershire sauce, some that had soy sauce. So there's a lot of different offsets of this dish. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not have a baked beans recipe. Here I am, I'm working it up on paper, okay? There are some of these that are blank, and they're going to get filled in during this video. So what we're doing here is actual recipe development. I do this every once in a while on my videos. You see me develop a recipe as I do the filming for the recipe. A lot of times I'll do recipe development during the week, and then on the weekend I'll do the filming, and I've already got a recipe I've worked out. In this case, we're going to be working it out together. All right? So some of this is blank, some of it's going to get changed. I wanted to create a really good baked beans recipe, but I wanted it to have sort of a southern flair to it. And I've noticed that a lot of the baked bean recipes from the South had that barbecue sauce thing going on. There's also people that put in ketchup. Ew. Okay, so I don't like using processed stuff. No ketchup, no barbecue sauce, Worcestershire sauce, soy sauce. So all of that gets kind of swept to the side. I like going with a little more of the raw ingredient kind of thing. There is one thing that'll be processed. This sauce is going to have some bourbon in it. Now, if you have any problems with alcohol, simply omit the bourbon, okay? Guys, it's not that hard, and it's not going to unravel the recipe, okay? It just means you lose that woody flavor. I guess if you want to substitute, you could maybe try using a little bit of liquid smoke and water, and you get you a little woody flavor. I like using the bourbon. It's easy to use, it's easier to measure out, and it gives a very distinct flavor. The alcohol cooks out quickly, so it's not an issue. Baked beans are a dish that take a lot of time. You have to first cook the bean after you've soaked the bean, and then you need to slow cook it with all of the final ingredients. So today we're going to work this recipe up and build it and turn it into an absolutely delicious dish right here on Texas Cooking Today. Before we get in the kitchen, please take a look for the merchandise. There's also recipes for sale now. Links in the description for Texas Cooking Today's merchandise, and you'll find that at S.A.Trotter.com. Folks, let's go and make this dish. Come on. Now folks, we have a whole lineup of beautiful ingredients here. The star of the dish is the bean itself. I have what has been soaking overnight now, these beautiful navy beans. Now these are the Great Northern, so they're a little bit bigger, all right? Nice bean to go with, it's beautiful. Folks, we're gonna take these and turn them into a beautiful baked dish. We're gonna be using salt pork, some tomatoes, and that's tomato paste, salt, medium onion, some garlic, brown sugar, molasses, bourbon, also paprika, mustard, and some vinegar. Folks, whatever type of vinegar you want is fine. Whatever color onion you want is fine. So this dish has a lot of flexibility to it, a lot of things you can do. This can be added or taken out at your choice. And I just like I said, I like the woody flavor of it, and I think it's going to really lend to these beans and to the final product. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. We have to cook up our beans. That's going to take a couple of hours at the most. Should be between 1 to 2 hours till they get nice and tender. Then we can use them for baking. Adding salt to my water. There's those beautiful beans. I'm about to get some water in this. I'm going to turn it on and get it up to a simmer, and then cover it and just let it sit there and simmer for about an hour and a half. Should be my cooking time. Could be a little shorter, could be a little longer, but we're shooting for that zone, okay? Now we're going to be testing our beans simply by biting into it, okay? So at about the 1 hour point, we test it by biting. At the 1.5, we do the same, and so forth. That's all there is to it, folks. Now let's get water in here. That was about 6 cups of water. I'm going to bring this up in temperature. We're going to be cooking these, okay? So here's the thing. I want to bring this up to a boil. As soon as I start seeing it boiling, and not hard, I don't want a rolling boil, just a light boil, I want to then cover it, reduce the temperature to a low, and that way it simmers. We're just going to gently simmer these beans until they become tender and delicious, and that's when we're going to start our whole baked beans. We're getting ready to make those baked beans. They're starting to come up and cook. It's time to think about what you're going to cook it in. Now I've got this nice little roasting pan, and I thought, okay, that's going to be really cool. I think I'll use that, and that way I can also serve out of it. It's a good looking dish, and I think will just liven up the whole thing. Here's the thing, you need something that's oven worthy, no matter what it is. So if it's a 13x9 glass baking dish, that'll work good. If it is any kind of a covered roaster or Dutch oven, that is perfect. You choose what you want. It just needs to work well in an oven. It's going to be in there for many hours, okay? Once we finish off the beans and get them done, our oven cook should be somewhere between 3 to 4 hours. Okay, 3 is what I'm hoping for, but sometimes I have to be realistic. So it just depends on the dish. I wanted to speak to you for just a minute about what you've seen, the way I've been preparing the beans. You saw me, I mixed up a whole bunch of salt in the water and then poured it in for the soak. Well, here's what I have learned. In the past, it has been taught, even by top chefs, it has been taught that you do not salt beans until the end of cooking because the salt itself would make the bean tough. Well, that is erroneous. It's a wives' tale. It's untrue. I love it when you have some folks that do a lot of study and experimenting. And you know, you get these folks that are actually food chemists and folks that really study food on the molecular level and how things interact with that food. The salt will break down the skin on the bean a little bit faster when you soak it with salt, and that's the advantage there. It does not make the beans tough. It is a good way of starting your beans, and so I recommend brining the beans. So I've got some notes to install in all of my other bean recipes where I have told people not to salt until the end. Go ahead and salt early, folks. It's not going to hurt a thing. It actually is good. It tenderizes the skin, as I said, and makes the bean a lot more palatable. And from what I've seen from the soak here, it really did work on those skins. It made them a lot softer. So now it's just a matter of cooking the inside of the bean till they're tender. All right, so there's our little salt story. Okay, folks, take a look at this. We have our boil started. That's where we want to go ahead, take that lid, put it on here, reduce your heat to a low, okay? Nice low heat, and that way you don't have to worry about any boil over. It will simmer wonderfully. You just got to give it time, and it's going to be 1.5 hours to 2 hours. My beans have finished early. The cook only took about 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I think that had a lot to do with using that brine in the soak. So I'm going to pour this through a strainer into a bowl. There we go. And they are cooked quite soft. I'm going to save that water I cooked it in because I'm going to use that in the final product. There we go. I'll just let that sit and cool. And my beans are ready to go when I'm ready to go. Let's start with this garlic. Getting that husk off. Just give it a light twist and it'll break right off of there. Okay, removing the paper from garlic isn't that tough. Okay, and this is a technique I came up with as a kid. Just give it a light twist without breaking the meat, of course, and your paper will come off. Even off of fresh garlic that the paper is really stubborn on, this technique works. Now that I have that skin off, I'm going to go ahead and just remove the callus. Even though I'm not going to be keeping the garlic, I think that makes it a little easier when you crush it for the garlic to break open. When you're processing an onion, leave the root end intact for a lot of different cuts. Okay, remove the top of the onion right there where the stalk comes up from it. This is as simple as now you have a flat spot on the onion to keep it from rolling around, okay? So root straight down just like that, and we have effectively made it very easy to work on our onion. Okay, now I'm looking for big dice here, and what I'm going to do on this, since I want big dice, I need to make just a single cross cut like this. Okay, there you go. And some people do a pulling action on that. I don't like it. I like cutting away like that. The next thing, big dice. All right, so one cut coming down right here, one more coming down right there. All right, just that simple. And then I want to do this here and here. Boom. So now, large dice on the onion, that's what I was looking for. Now I want to do this one like this. I'm going to cut him here. All right, I'm going to make a single downward cut here. I'm going to make a single downward cut here, and there's my dice. Okay, so sometimes that technique is easier for people. Just quarter it, okay, and that way you don't have to make that lateral cut. You've turned the lateral cut into a downward cut. Boom, boom. How's that for a trick? All right. Onions ready, garlic is ready, Now, let's move on to that salt pork. We're going to cut up that salt pork now, and this is about, it's about getting a flavor to disperse throughout. Now I'm cutting about 1/2 inch wide strips on this. Now I'm going to cut 1/2 inch cuts again, giving myself some big dice like this. Nice, huh? All right, we are there. Diced salt pork. Okay, this is a neat little lesson because it's about getting the flavor in something without having that item in the same something. All right, so I want the flavor of garlic in my dish. What I'm going to do is crush it just like that. Each clove gets crushed and tossed in. All right, next, I'm going to add some oil right in my pan here. The whole idea here is we're going to take the flavor from the garlic, turn it into flavored oil. It's just that simple. That oil will mix well with the tomato paste, which is naturally oily in itself, and it will mix right in, not a problem. Then when we make our sauce, we have this beautiful garlic flavor in the background. Now, this is what I'm talking about right here. You see, we're just simply frying up these cloves in a little oil, and I have it over a medium heat, and they're starting to turn color. See how they're browning a little on the edge there? Exactly what I anticipated. So, about another minute of cooking, I can take that garlic out of there, and then I have oil to work with. All right. Pull that garlic out. See there? Just light browning on it, nothing heavy. All our flavors right in there in the pot. It's just that simple. So, when you want to not have to chop the garlic or anything like that, then this is the way to get there, okay? Next, we need to get tomato paste right down in there. There we have it. Everything's getting started up now. So that was our bourbon going in there. I'm going to be adding in the vinegar here in just a little bit, but I now need to get the sugar down into this, all right? And that molasses, oh yeah. Isn't that just beautiful? Alrighty. There we go, getting that molasses and sugar stirred in. This is really nice. Have a beautiful mixture. Now I'm going to start with 1 tablespoon of my vinegar, no more. Get that mixed together. Now my recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of ground mustard. So I'm going to measure that in my hand, break up these lumps so they're not hard to deal with in the pot. There we go. I know it looks weird, but it's a smart thing to do. Just break up those lumps. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and measure out my paprika the same way. We're going to start with a couple of tablespoons. So I've got, same thing, little lumps in there. 1 tablespoon there. And a 2nd tablespoon with a few little lumps. Boom. Now the whole idea of building up, I can't take a spice out of this, okay? I can add, but I cannot subtract. So in recipe development, whenever I'm developing a new recipe, this is exactly how I do it. Now this is sort of the way a lot of folks do a basic barbecue sauce. Not too different from this. Mustard's not a common element, but it does sometimes get used. There we are. I want to bring this up in temperature over a medium heat. As soon as it cooks off that alcohol and it's simmered for a few minutes, and this is going to take about 15 minutes, I'm going to taste it and we're going to adjust the seasoning as needed. If I need to thin this at all, I will be using the liquid the beans cooked in, okay? Just that simple. Please remember, we should always taste what we make. See how well it's sticking to that spoon? That is a thick product. Flavor is really, really good on this. I absolutely love it. I think I hit it right on the head of the nail right there. All of my flavors are dead on. All this needs is a little bit of salt to liven it up, and we're ready to make our dish. All right, let's get those beans right down in there. Go. Just going to even them out, and they are quite tender. It's wonderful. All right, next thing. That sauce I cooked up. There we go. Get that spread out and kind of even. Let it work its way down in there. We're going to be adding some of that bean stock also. And that's because we're going to be baking this for some time. It is going to need any extra liquid it can get. Now see how that goes right on down through those beans? Here we go. And I'm going to save back what's left, because part of the way through cooking I want to check it, and if it needs more liquid, it gets more of the same thing. There we have it. Now I'm going to start topping this with my pork and the onion. Alrighty, so I'll get my onion in here. There we go. Now for the salt pork. Beautiful. The thing of it is after this salt pork renders down through this, we're going to take the top off and we're going to let things caramelize a little bit. So it's going to gain some color and texture at that time, and flavor just begins to explode when you start doing stuff like that. So here we have a gorgeous dish that's ready for the oven. This is ready to go in the oven. Got to get a cover on it. I want to check this every hour on the hour and add liquid as needed until the baking is finished. After about 3 hours of baking, we're going to uncover it, let it caramelize on top, let some of that moisture cook out, and we're going to have our baked beans just the way we need them. The quantity of what we used today started with our beans. That's 1 pound. Over here we have the vinegar. That was to taste. 6 ounces of tomato paste, 1/2 pound of salt pork, a teaspoon of salt, 3 cloves of garlic, 1 medium onion, 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar, 1/3 of a cup of molasses, up to 1 cup of bourbon. 3/4 of a cup is really what you're shooting for right there, and choose the mildest bourbon you can find. On the mustard, 1 teaspoon. The paprika, anywhere from 2 teaspoons up to 1/4 of a cup. This vinegar here, it's going to be anywhere from a tablespoon to 1/4 of a cup on that, and that's really to taste whether you like that sauce a little more tangy and acidic, or if you want it to be a little more to the sweet side, and it's controlled right there. Folks, there are your ingredients. Let's take a look at this gorgeous dish. All right, this has been cooking now for about 4.5 hours. There we go. Oh, it has reduced, skinned over on top, and looking beautiful. Alrighty, now it's time to take a closer look at our beans that are already beautiful. Right there. Of course, what is it without a little bit of the salt pork? Well, here we are. The end of 4.5 hours of baking. Nice and sweet, but we're not being too sweet. The beans are just buttery soft. They still have just enough firmness to stand up on their own, keep their shape, but just as soft as they could be without falling apart. You know, it's fantastic when a dish comes out so right. This has a good flavor to it. It's something that you need to give a try. And folks, thank you very much for watching. Hey, this is a beautiful recipe. You've seen how we develop something here, and that's how I do that sometimes. Sometimes in the kitchen you develop that recipe your way. And as you saw, we kept the spices on the low. It was only 2 tablespoons of paprika and 1 tablespoon of the vinegar and a teaspoon of salt. And frankly, we end up with a fantastic finished product. It doesn't really have a tomatoey taste to it. It has a very robust flavor to it, and it's good. So folks, give it a try. It's a good recipe, and it's one that you could just kind of tweak and adjust your way. Please take a look at the products that I provide for you at S.A.Trotter.com, and links in the description down there for the recipe, for my website, and all that good stuff. Thank you very much, and folks, please have a good day. Check out the rest of my channel too. Oh, heck yeah, come on.